Chapter 2 Fighting Onward. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 2 of my What If Sonic Underground Was Canon story. If you're new to this series, click the link in the description below to be taken to the playlist. Now let's begin the next chapter. Sonic spins around to see a very familiar lion walking towards him and his siblings. A wide grin spreads on his face as he walks to meet his childhood friend halfway, Sonia and Manic right behind him. Greetings, Cyrus, he asks why he's here, having heard that he and his dad moved back to Core Island about a month ago. Returning Sonic's smile with a tight one of his own, Cyrus confirms that he had. He'd actually come looking for Sonic. Sonic's smile immediately falls, not liking the look on Cyrus's face. He asks what's wrong, and Cyrus suggests that they all sit down for this conversation. Once everyone has taken a seat on the grass, Sonic turns back to Cyrus, guessing that it must be really bad news if Cyrus is suggesting that they sit. Cyrus nods before pulling out a long rolled up strip of paper and handing it to Sonic. As Sonic takes it, Cyrus explains that this is the most recent list of roboticization victims from the last month. It was updated about 48 hours after Sonic left for South Island. Sonic unrolls the scroll. This isn't a particularly long list, so Cyrus can't be showing it to him for that reason. The only other reason that Cyrus would seek him out specifically to show him this is if someone he knows is on it. He begins to look for any names that he recognizes, and almost immediately he finds Lionel Leon, Cyrus's father. Sonic turns to his friend with sad understanding in his eyes. Softly, he asks how Tails is taking the news. For a split second, Cyrus looks at him in confusion, but just as quickly there's realization in his eyes and he shakes his head. He tells Sonic that Tails doesn't know about their father yet. He's on West Side Island with his aunt, but that's not what he's trying to show him. At Sonic's confused look, Cyrus simply gestures for him to keep reading. Turning back to the scroll, he does just that. It takes a few more names, but then he sees it. Sonic's eyes widen in shock as he stares at the name in front of him. His hands are shaking so badly that he loses his grip on the list, allowing it to drift to the ground. But he doesn't care, because the name on that list, the name that is now burned into his eyes, is Sir Charles Hedgehog, Uncle Chuck. He's not sure how long he sits there, just staring at nothing, but he's brought back by the feeling of Cyrus squeezing his arm gently. Looking up, he sees his childhood friend looking at him with understanding. The lion had just lost his own father, and here he is offering comfort to Sonic. Recognizing the look in Sonic's eyes, Cyrus cuts him off before he even starts speaking, telling him that if he starts saying anything about how he's used to this or how what Cyrus is going through is worse or anything along those lines, he will smack him upside the head. He knows that Chuck was all Sonic had left. Wrong. He's still got us. Cyrus looks up in surprise, turning to the unfamiliar green hedgehog whom, until now, had not said a word. Same for the pink hedgehog on Sonic's other side, who is now rubbing the blue blur's back gently. Highly confused, but trying to remember his manners, Cyrus politely asks who he is. At this, Sonic chuckles, saying that it feels like they're doing this a bit out of order, before introducing Cyrus to his brother and sister. Cyrus is stunned. Since when has Sonic had siblings? He would have thought that the Motor Mouth would have talked about them until someone duct taped his mouth shut when they were kids. Sonic snickers weakly, admitting that, yeah, he probably would have, before explaining that they'd only found out about each other recently. As Sonic begins to explain the whole story with getting the letters from their mother, Sonia picks up the list from where Sonic dropped it. Turning it over, she tries to find her supposed uncle's name. What her eyes land on, however, is not the name of an uncle that she'll now never meet, but the name of a middle-aged noblewoman with a heart of gold, Lady Winterbelle Windermere. Without a word, she folds the paper in half and slips it into her pocket. With explanations done, Sonic asks if Cyrus is going to join them on their mission for the Chaos Emeralds. Cyrus shakes his head, saying that the offer is tempting, but he needs to tell Tails about their father, and he knows that if he starts making excuses to put it off, he'll never do it. He'd rather his little brother hear it from him than some idiot that doesn't know how to keep their mouth shut. Sonic gives an understanding nod before holding out his fist. Smiling, Cyrus taps Sonic's fist with one of his own and wishes the triplets luck, before turning around and walking to the portal out of the garden. Turning to Sonic, Manic asks if he has any idea of where the other emeralds might be, or how many there are. Turning to his brother with a slightly strange smile, Sonic tells him that South Island has 6 main environmental biomes, including Green Hill. Each one has a chow garden, and each garden has a statue just like the one they found here. If those statues are like this one, then that means that there are 5 more emeralds they need to get. The closest garden now is Marble Garden and Marble Zone. Throwing an arm each over Sonic and Sonia's shoulders, Manic tells them that they'd better get this tour on the road. Sonic gives a weak chuckle while Sonia smiles tightly. Marble Zone, as it turns out, is the site of some ancient temple ruins surrounded by lava. As they proceed cautiously through the zone, Sonic explains that most of the ruins are actually underground. They also need to be careful of more than just the lava, as the whole place is filled with booby traps. As they move through the marble death trap, Manic can't help but notice the way his siblings are acting. Sonic is being extremely reckless, dashing into fights with badniks without even waiting for his siblings, making moves to get them across lava pools that put him in an unreasonable amount of danger, while leaving Sonia and Manic in the clear. Meanwhile, Sonia, who'd been the one to tell Sonic to count on them and not do everything on his own when they first arrived, is being quiet. Unnaturally so. Sonic's issue he can hazard a guess at, but what could be bothering Sonia? He doubts that it's just her not wanting to tell Sonic what to do in the wake of finding out about their uncle. She doesn't seem the type. She's also been spacing out a lot. Something is clearly up with both of his siblings, and Manic is struggling to make sure that they don't completely lose their heads, both metaphorically and literally. Eventually, night falls, forcing the siblings to make camp rather than stumble around in the dark. Manic watches in silent worry as Sonic starts trying to make a fire and Sonia silently uses a stick to draw patterns in the dirt. Something is seriously wrong with his siblings, but how the heck is he supposed to help? He can't just ask them directly what's going on, they'll just say it's nothing or shut down completely. He's seen it happen enough times with the other teams back home. It's when they're all eating dinner that he gets an idea of how to break the ice. Looking up at the sky, he spots a constellation that he thinks he recognizes. Pointing it out, he asks his siblings if that's the constellation Illumina. The question does its job, thankfully, getting both Sonic and Sonia to look up. However, he's not expecting Sonic to shake his head and tell him that that's not Illumina. They're too far south for them to see that constellation. That's Illumina's southern counterpart, Void. Sonia looks at her blue brother in surprise, asking how he knew that. There's a long moment of silence, so long that Manic is beginning to think that either Sonic didn't hear the question or he's choosing to ignore it. But then, Sonic speaks. He tells his siblings that his ma and pa taught him. Sonia looks at him in confusion, asking what he's talking about. She thought he said he was living with their uncle. Manic decides to address the hint of resentment in her voice at a future date, instead focusing on his brother's answer. His heart squeezes when Sonic begins to explain. Their mother didn't give him to their uncle when she separated them. She gave him to his ma and pa. The Resistance had already begun to form, and they were 2 of the founding members, alongside Uncle Chuck. So, even though he didn't know that he was actually his uncle, he grew up calling him that. He only started living with him when he was 8. After... He trails off, but he doesn't need to finish his sentence. There's a long moment of silence before Sonia speaks in a wavering voice. Does it ever stop hurting? Sonic and Manic both turn to her with wide eyes, only to see her curling in on herself and trembling. Together, they scooch over in order to wrap her up in a hug from both sides. In a quiet voice, almost as if he's afraid of speaking any louder, Sonic tells her that he'll let her know if he finds out. On the other side of Sonia, Manic's forehead creases before he speaks. No, not really. But it does change. It won't always feel like this, like the entire world is crumbling around you. It takes time, but eventually it'll become something else. You don't stop missing them, but you do start to remember the good things a lot easier, and it stops tasting so bitter. There'll be days when it feels like you're right back at square one, but it gets easier to get back to where you were each time. Sonic looks at his brother, eyes full of understanding, while Sonia looks at him in surprise. Smiling sadly at her, he explains that he grew up in the slums. Out there, loss becomes a pretty frequent, unwelcome guest. In his mind's eye, he sees the silhouette of his first lost friend. Her teasing smirks, telling him that he's a fast learner as she teaches him how to hack into one of Robotnik's warehouses. The three siblings sit there in the light of the fire in total silence, taking solace from each other's presence as they remember those that they've lost. The next day, the trio wake up on the hard stone floor, all curled into each other in one big cuddle pile. The first to extract themselves from the pile is Sonic, who then holds out his hands to his siblings to help them up. With smiles, Sonia and Manic let him, before they all set off to continue their journey through Marble Zone. Eventually, they emerge from the underground ruins into the bright light of day. The stone path before them is damaged in several places, revealing the river of lava below. Recognizing the area, Sonic turns to his siblings with a grin, telling them that it isn't much further until the garden. Before they can take more than a few steps, however, a sudden fireball comes rushing at them. Acting fast, Sonic tackles Sonia and Manic out of the way, sending them all sprawling to the pavement. Getting back to their feet, they all look in the direction the fireball had come from and spot an eggmobile with two figures sitting in it. The one standing at the controls, cackling like a madman and commenting about loving a challenge, is a purple Jerboa wearing a hat. Behind him is a small figure covered from head to toe in copper armor that looks like they made it themselves. Their voices echoey and distorted from the helmet, but it sounds distinctly female as the armor-clad girl nervously tells the Jerboa to sit back down so they don't fall out of the eggmobile. Glaring up at the two, Sonic asks who they're supposed to be. With a snaggle-toothed grin, the Jerboa introduces himself as Fang the Hunter, the greatest bounty hunter to ever live, holder of the record of the most bounties collected in a single day, the record for the largest bounty ever collected, and the holder of a spotless mission completion record. He then jerks his thumb at the armor-clad girl behind him. And this is Trip. He explains to the triplets that Robotnik is paying them top dollar for their heads, still attached to their bodies or otherwise. He's even supplied them with some fun little toys with which to take them down. Taking aim with the Eggmobile's cannon, he asks them if they want to be well done or extra crispy. He unleashes another fireball, forcing the triplets to scatter in different directions. However, they soon regroup and begin their counterattack, with Sonia lifting up Sonic in order to launch him at the Eggmobile while the blue blur curls up in a ball. When Sonic hits, he nearly knocks the still-standing Fang out of the cockpit, and leaves a massive dent in the metal plating, which the Jerboa curses that he'll now have to pay to get buffed out. Taking advantage of Sonic's freefall, Fang takes aim, intending to burn him to a crisp. Thankfully, Manic is able to catch his brother and get them out of the way with his hoverboard. Fang growls in anger as he attempts to launch fireballs at the brothers, swatting away Trip as she frantically tries to get his attention. The Eggmobile shakes suddenly, once again nearly dislodging him. Spinning around, he sees Sonia standing behind him with another large rock in her hands. Turning to Trip, he demands why she didn't tell him that she'd gotten behind them. Trip attempts to stammer out a response, but Fang ignores her, instead turning back to Sonia and launching a fireball at her. As this happens, Sonia throws the rock in her hands at the ball, hoping to slow it down, spinning in order to get some extra power into it. However, to her surprise, the rock flies right through the fireball and becomes lodged in the barrel of the launcher. Desperately, Fang slams on the control panel, trying to get the Eggmobile to do something, when Trip taps his shoulder nervously. Turning to her with a growl, he demands to know what she wants. Shakily, Trip points to a spot behind and a little above them. Turning to look, Fang spots the brothers rushing right towards them, with Sonic revving up at the front of the hoverboard. Before either of the bounty hunters can do anything, Manic flips the board, launching the spinning blue ball that is Sonic right at them. At breakneck speed, Sonic smashes right through the damaged metal of the Eggmobile, carving a large hole right through the center of it. In a frightened voice, Trip tells Fang that they should get out of here fast, while Fang continues to bang on the control panel. Growling furiously, the Jerboa shouts at the triplets that this isn't the end. He's the world's greatest bounty hunter, and he always gets his catches. With that, the two fly off while the Eggmobile sparks and sputters. With the bounty hunters now handled, Sonic leads his siblings to a little archway surrounded by carvings and ancient artworks. Sonia's eyes sparkle with delight as she gazes at the runes and art, asking why Sonic never told her that the ruins still have some of their carvings intact. Confused, he tells her that he didn't think it mattered, since they're all in some ancient language that no one he knows can read. Sonia grins as she digs in her pocket, smugly telling her brother that he is very wrong. Pulling out a camera, she begins taking photos of the ruins, explaining that she learned how to read this language during her history lessons. She's never had a chance to put her translating to the test with some actual ruins before though. Sonic and Manic watch in stunned silence for a moment, while Sonia goes full fangirl over some dusty old ruins. The first to recover is Manic, who turns to Sonic and asks exactly where the portal to the next Chow Garden is. The question snaps Sonic out of his stunned silence, having almost forgotten what they were doing. Reaching into his quills, he pulls out a golden ring and throws it at the keystone of the archway, where it slots into a hole that is exactly its size. Once the ring is in place, green sparks dance around the pillars before being pulled into the center of the archway by an invisible force. There, they swirl around each other until they form a green portal. Grabbing their sister by the back of her dress, the two brothers drag her through the portal while she is still trying to take pictures of the ruins until the glow of the portal begins to obscure too much of the image. On the other side of the portal, the triplets find themselves in Marble Garden. Unlike the Garden of Green Hill Zone, this garden appears to be inside of a large temple similar to the ruins outside, only completely intact and with a roof made out of a massive plane of glass. A long bed of flowers and fruit trees run along each side of the hall-like building, before curving into a circle around a statue at the far end. Around the edge of these garden beds run little man-made streams that don't seem to have any obvious source. Little Chow wander around the space, paying little mind to the new arrivals. And all over the walls are runes and murals. Sonia's eyes gleam at the sight of the new runes and murals, but Sonic and Manic don't release their hold on her. In a tone of strained patience, Manic tells her that she can take pictures after they get the next emerald. Walking up to the statue, the siblings all activate their medallions once again and play for the statue. This time, they obtain the red emerald. With that done, Sonia immediately grabs out her camera and begins taking photos of the walls. Sonic and Manic watch her go with a sigh. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave this story for now. Join me next time as the triplets continue their journey through South Island and have yet more encounters with the bounty hunter duo. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.